Why are my plants dying? There's so much algae. I solve one issue, but another one appears. The fish are suffering. I've tried adjusting my light, nutrients, and I've even added CO2, but nothing is working. Why is everyone else's tank doing amazing, but not mine? These are the plagues that infect every hobbyist across all levels of experience. It gets so bad that it causes a horrible and infectious disease called giving up. This causes a person to completely drop the hobby to get away from the stress of it all. But that shouldn't be the case. In fact, planted tanks are kind of easy in a way. Here's why. First of all, this video isn't about how to set up a tank and the equipment needed, but more on the fundamentals and what it takes to have a successful planted aquarium. If you're looking for stuff about the equipment, here's a playlist where each video goes in depth of what you need equipment-wise. The biggest fundamental concepts that everyone needs to know is plant health and tank balance. I've already made an in-depth video on balancing. The main idea is obtaining an equilibrium between lights, nutrients, and CO2. There are a plethora of variables that can influence balance. Plant species selection is one of the big ones. Plant selection is important due to their growth requirements. For example, if you want a low-tech tank, you should stick to easy-to-grow plants that do not require a lot of maintenance and or CO2. This concept is similar to cooking. Mixing jelly beans with rice is generally not a good idea. It's also not a good idea to mix high light, high CO2 required plants with low light, no CO2 required plants if you do not plan on using CO2. It's just like how you don't mix pineapple with pizza. Now, plant size is a sub-variable of plant selection. This is another big topic that I have already covered in a different video, but the main idea is strategically placing plants in places that can limit the amount of plant body blocking and overshadowing. Growth speed is another important sub-variable. Fast growers will use up more nutrients. The same thing can be said for heavy root feeders, so there is a chance that some plants may get stunned and show deficiencies because of this. This is where plant health comes into play. Both plant health and a balanced tank go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. One can argue that maximizing plant health is essentially a balanced tank and one free of algae. So how do we achieve that? Let me show you just how easy it is with this concept. This is a pie chart, obviously. But the properties of a pie chart is that its values must always add up to 100%. Each one represents the levels of light, CO2, and nutrients needed for your tank to thrive. We need to optimize the slices of these three in a way that maximizes plant growth. Tanks can be set up in a multitude of ways, all with varying success. But it doesn't matter if you have a low or high-tech tank. The pie chart does not discriminate. Your plants are all that matters. In theory, this is very straightforward to compile when you take the time to research plants and know their requirements. But in practice, this is where everyone gets frustrated. In order to use the pie chart, we need to take a look at the requirements of your plant species, mainly the one that requires the most. For example, here are two plants. One requires CO2, while the other one doesn't. If we only optimize one of them, the other will suffer. But doing the opposite will cover the bases for both plants. Now, how do we know if we went too far or not enough? Tanks will show signs that one or more of these variables is off balance. These come in the form of the presence of algae and declining plant health. For example, legginess in plants is often a sign that it's not receiving enough light. String algae is often a sign of fluctuating or low CO2 levels, and pinholes in plant leaves are a clear indication of a potassium deficiency. These kind of indicators can show up by themselves, or in the more likely case, a combination of them, and that is what overwhelms people. Fortunately, fixing just one of these issues might just be enough to fix everything else. My tank used to suffer quite a bit in the past with a lot of plant deficiencies. Obviously, I tried to fix it by using a higher dosage, but that didn't work, which meant that the amount of nutrients wasn't enough. What did help was switching from a lean-based fertilizer to an EI-based one. More info about the different types of fertilization methods here. Nonetheless, plants grew better, but not at 100%, and staghorn algae was still present. Staghorn is often a sign of nutrient imbalances. If you thought that the solution was to increase the dosage even further, you are wrong. The actual issue was light. Lighting was the limiting factor. My light settings were quite low. Increasing the intensity of the light allowed the plants to undergo stronger photosynthesis, thus utilizing more CO2 and nutrients. This allowed the tank to strike that balance that I was looking for, thus reducing algae. It's one of the reasons why it's best to look at the tank as a whole instead of tunnel visioning on a single variable. This entire process was over a span of a few weeks, where I only changed one variable at a time. Changing multiple of them at the same time gives me no clue on what solved the issue or what is more likely to happen is that your issues get even worse. Hopefully that made sense. Of course, there are a lot more to it than it seems. You can take one piece of the pie and dissect it even further, but all in all, it's still the same pie chart regardless of your setup. Once you understand this concept and how it pertains to a balanced tank, I can assure you that every tank you create will be a successful one. If you want to learn more about topics on the intricacies of these variables, there's a few videos to check out.